Accountability Commission now be in session Thursday, November 20th, 2014. Please stand if you wish. Father God, I realize we are here today as a group who are on the road to destiny. You created us with the capacity to learn, to ingest, digest, and appropriate the information. You have given us the resources to finish what we began, to build roads. Thank you, Lord, for the opportunity and the vision that we are now realizing. Help us to come together and accomplish our goals. Use what we gave us to bless us. That is my prayer, and I pray today in your precious name I pray, amen. Delegate Yancey, would you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Will you join in the Pledge of Allegiance? I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Sam. Now be seated. Next will be the public comments. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes each, please. Mr. Robert Brown, would you please join us?
Good morning. I want to address the third crossing, which General Taylor Freeway is a solution for HRC studies CBA 9 segment 1 and 3. CBA 9 segment 1 will create no tangible benefit to the general public without the other 4 segments, a much more cost-effective solution that will achieve the 6 purpose and needs as described in HRCS CBA 9 segment 1 and 3 is the General Taylor Freeway as described and illustrated by the General Taylor Freeway map. This plan will save billions of dollars in initial expense and achieve all of the purpose and needs. The savings by not connecting segment 1 to the Monica Merrimack Bridge will pay for segment 3. This will stop gridlock from taking place at the connection with the Monica Merrimack Bridge. This results in a complete roadway for the cost of only segment 1. The remaining segments can be added later when necessary. General Taylor Freeway from Hampton Boulevard to NOB Norfolk to Route 164 Western Freeway will fulfill the goal of moving truck traffic west from NIT. This route will create access to NOB Norfolk without introducing additional transit vacation traffic at NOB's main gates. This will complete the planned Craney Island connector necessary for the Craney Island Port project. This construction sequence is a much more realistic approach to the original intent of this crossing. Okay, there were 6 purpose and needs. Need number 1, to reduce congestion, Hampton Road Bridge Tunnel. Number 2, access between the north and south side. Number 3, population growth. Number 4, improve military transportation. Number 5, improve regional tourist transportation. Number 6, port increased shipping volume in truck traffic for highway expansion. A careful examination of this report will reveal the folly of this plan. The true reason for this crossing is revealed in number 6. Container truck traffic on Hampton Boulevard. Need number 1 through 5 will not be accomplished as can be revealed by an unbiased investigation of this report. Number 1 will not be achieved unless section 2 is built at the same time as section 1 and 3 as are constructed. This requires 2 tunnels and over 20 miles of new bridge. A trip from I-64 from Hampton Coliseum to Virginia Beach will require over 5 miles of additional travel on this convoluted route. Number 2, additional access to the south side of the peninsula will have the same problems as described in number 1. A much more realistic approach would be another tunnel at the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel. Number 3, Increase in population will increase demand on highway systems in the future. The wasteful expense of this project, about $5 billion, will place an unfair burden on the citizens of Hampton Road. These funds can be used much more equitably as described in other documents. Military movement will not be facilitated by the encroachment of transit traffic, tourists at NOV's main gate at I-564 runway underpass. This will give the Navy a justification to reduce personnel and ships at NOV. Number 5, tourist travel. 201, 4 million visitors. This route will not help with tourist travel. Quite the contrary, it will add another 5 miles, as mentioned in number 1, to a trip to Virginia Beach. This additional unnecessary traffic at I-564 NOV will create gridlock. Number 6, the movement of shipping containers off Hampton Boulevard. This appears to be the real reason this plan was conceived in the first place. This also brings to mind the old saying, "Oh, what a tangled web we weave when at first we start to deceive." A more proper name would be the spider web crossing. The problem of moving shipping containers and gaining access to NOV north of Hampton Boulevard cannot be achieved with other more cost-effective methods. Trucks create 95% of the damage to the highway system, and they are indispensable for our quality of life. This leads to the conclusion that roads on land are more cost-effective to build and maintain than bridges. Eliminating as much bridge construction as possible is the most equitable solution. This is another reason that this route is flawed, unless you are a bond salesman or a bridge builder. And this handout is on the table outside, and I would highly recommend that you take a look at this and study what's in this plan, because it will save a lot of money.
Brown, thank you for your comments. Next slide, please. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon. My name is Donna Sy, and I live in Portsmouth, and I'm also the state coordinator for the National Liberty Alliance. The principle of Liberty 21, strong local self-government, is the keystone to preserving human liberties. Political power automatically gravitates towards the center, and the purpose of the Constitution is to prevent that from happening. The centralization of political power always destroys liberty by removing the decision-making function from the people on the local level and transferring it to the officers of the central government. This process gradually inactivates the spirit of service among the people, and they lose the will to solve their own problems. They also cease to be involved in community affairs. They become the nameless and forgotten and the seething crowds of the city, and they are the corrupted, faceless puppets that have neither a voice nor a vote. In ancient England, local self-government is found in connection with the political and territorial divisions of tens, hundreds, boroughs, counties, and shires, in which the body of inhabitants had a voice in managing their own affairs. Hence, it was the seed of the Anglo-Saxon constitution of civil government. In the course of events, the Crown deprived the body of the people of the power of local rule and vested in it a small number of persons in each locality, who were called municipal councils. They were clothed with the power of filling vacancies in their number and became self-perpetuating bodies. In this way, the ancient freedom of self-government was undermined, and the power of the ruling classes was installed in its place. Today, Virginia has its new aristocracy. Our municipal councils, they are clothed with power granted to it by the General Assembly, not by the people. SB 513 and HB 2313 legislation is attempting to rob us, Virginia patriots, of our life-giving spirit of self-government. We are not going to allow this law to dampen our spirit for liberty and justice for all. We have not lost the will to solve our own problems. We are not going to cease to be involved in our community affairs. We're not going to be the nameless and forgotten in the seething crowds of our cities, and we're not going to be corrupted, faceless puppets that have neither a voice nor a vote. We are putting you on notice. We, the good people of Virginia, are not going to consent to this tyranny. We're not going to consent to be ruled by the self-government, self-appointed few. The self-appointed few has multiplied into an army of non-governmental agencies trying to take on the New World Order crusade, such as Connect Hampton Roads, Hampton Roads Public Transportation Alliance, Transportation for America, Mobility Matters, Hampton Roads for Rail, the American Conservative Center for Public Transportation, the Economic Forecasting Project, HR Association for Commercial Real Estate, and many other agencies too numerous to count. The Hrtac was created to have the Transportation Bonding Authority and the issuance of bonds for the Hampton Roads Transportation Projects. That is all. We only need 6 people to do the work of bonding authority. We need to have people who know how to do a bond. All we need is a job description on the bonding requirements. I have attached the sample guidelines to simplify what needs to be done for this commission. Our taxes do not need to pay for another bureaucracy. If the Secretary of Transportation wanted to work to do the bonding for the transportation project, then the job is limited in scope. We, the good people of Virginia, do not need this commission in the first place. We do not consent to have one. Hrtac is all about transportation funding for the Virginia Port Authority. It is all about getting trucks in and out of the port of Hampton Roads. It is all about building another terminal on Trading Island. It is all about getting more material things into the hands of the unaware people of Virginia and other states in our union. Have you seen all the frivolous materialism coming in from China to stock the shelves of Walmart? These aren't necessities. Look at Portsmouth. We have lost so much of our land for the benefit of the port. Not only loss of land, but the excessive building of apartments and houses with the remaining land that we do have. Portsmouth is a port city. It is an industrial city. But the non-governmental agencies are promoting us to live like rats in an urban environment, to promote the totalitarian government that we, the good people of Virginia, are saying, no, we do not consent to this form of government. And I have attached a notice of the totalitarian form of government you are trying to force on us. We, the people, say, no, we do not consent. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Chairman. Ms. Diana Howard, please. Diana Howard. Good time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Didn't hear my name, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I am the first to speak on the bylaws that the Hampton Roads Tea Party and the Virginia Beach Taxpayer Alliance worked on, and so we would like to get them in the record. And so the first bylaws change we have here is we request that a Hrtac Citizen Advisory Committee is created for the Hrtac, and that the chair of the Hrtac Citizens Advisory Committee is welcome to have a seat at the table of the Hrtac deliberations, serving the citizens as a non-voting member. We would prefer to have the chair of the Hrtac Citizens Advisory Committee to be a voting member, but we're sure that that would require an action by the General Assembly. This precedent was set by the TPO in response to a scathing review by the FTA that pointed out that the TPO and the PDC were failing miserably to include citizens in their deliberations and decision-making process. This change works in conjunction with other requests. Bylaws change too, and following change to Article 5, please add Section G that creates Hrtac Citizens Advisory Committee. Please fashion this committee similar to CTAC of the Hampton Roads Transportation Planning Organization. Please stipulate that the members of the Citizens Advisory Committee are selected annually by lottery based on applying to serve on the Citizens Advisory Committee. They are not appointed, rather they are selected from a pool of citizens that have applied to serve. The TPO and the PDC solicit specific demographics to fill this committee. Our view is that we are all citizens, and if we apply to serve in our government, we should all have an equal opportunity to do so. We shouldn't make it a policy decision to discriminate against white males earning a middle-class income because of some quest to fashion a group based on the goal of creating the illusion of diversity. Let anyone interested apply, and let the luck of the draw decide who can serve. Change up the members every year to encourage fresh faces, more opportunities to serve, and fresh ideas. We believe this is a better approach than meddling with these citizen committees to try to create some type of right mix of representation. Please specify that when making this change to the bylaws, the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee shall be selected by the Citizens Advisory Committee, not appointed by the chair of the Hrtac. Let the citizens choose their spokesperson, not the government-appointed Hrtac. As stated in bylaws change 1, please add the chair of the Citizens Advisory Committee as a non-voting member of the commission. Citizens should have a welcome seat at the table, as all of you who now sit here. And we would like to add this to the record. There'll be other speakers after that, but since I have time left, I would also like to say that I'm not for this financial report that you have here that you're going to be voting on. I think the amount of money that you're going to be paying for the executive director and et cetera, is exorbitant, since all of you have already decided what you're going to do when you were on the TPO, and now you're all going to like fund it. So see what their purpose is for the rest of the year, these exorbitant salaries and benefits, et cetera. Also on the voting for a bank, I don't see why we have to have a bank. In the first place, it's already in the treasury, just pay as you go along instead of voting on a bank. And if you're going to be voting on the bank, it should not be town bank. I find it I find it suspicious that, you know, after the governor, who was supported by town bank directors, gets into office, he turns around and then appoints town bank directors to the Commonwealth Transportation Board, the Secretary of Transportation, to the port, 5 General Assembly members here who will have connections to town bank, and even though 3 of the mayors have resigned from the board, I'm sure they still have stock, so that stock would increase on voting for town bank, so I think that would still be a conflict of interest. Thank you.
Thank you. Teresa Langell, please. Teresa Langell. Teresa Langell, yes, ma'am. Can you hear me? Am I?
We can't hear back.
Cannot hear at all.
Can you hear me now?
No.
Okay. I'll do better.
Are we ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. My name is Teresa Langell. I'm a member of the Marine Health Group. I'm a Republican. I'm a taxpayer. I have been a taxpayer in Virginia Beach for 31 years. And I have crawled out of my life, and because I'm feeling the burden, and many of in my community are feeling the burden of overwhelming taxes from the federal, state, and city levels. Okay, I'm here to speak on changes to the bylaws, specifically referring to Article number 3, the terms of office. The terms of office that we would like to see are: officers of the commission shall be elected at the annual organizational meeting of the commission, serve for a term of 1 year unless removed prior to the completion of the term by the commission, or until a successor is elected. Other than the chair and vice chair, all officers shall be eligible for re-election. The vice chair shall assume the duties of the chair after the chair has completed a 1-year term. If the chair is from a county and city having a population greater than 100,000, then the vice chair shall only be selected from those counties and cities having a population less than 100,000. Each county and city having their chief elected officer elected to serve as the chair or vice chair shall be ineligible to serve as chair or vice chair for a minimum of 6 years. In summary, it is interesting to point out that these changes were submitted to all of you before the Hrtac ever met. Had you allowed us to speak and not ignored our help and advice, this proposed change would have helped fix several of the issues that Hrtac faced during our last few meetings. As you recall, this body went around and around on that matter. However, since the Aubrey Lane, the appointed non-elected section of transportation refused to permit us to present our requested bylaw changes to you before you voted to adopt HRTC bylaws that he created and provided to you, this body was unable to benefit from the wisdom that we the people, can bring to the table. Members of our commission, that was a missed opportunity to hear us. We demanded to be heard. We have dealt with many different organizations for a very long time, and we understand bylaws. We're not stupid as the press likes to think we are. We can help you do a better job at what you do. But you have to allow us to do that. You're obligated to do that. We hope you want our help. You, our representatives. You should want to represent us as we wish. It is your duty to do so. You serve us. We do not serve you. At this point in time, I don't see that really happening. Why? Because we can't speak on the agenda items here at the HRTAC. But that's a different bylaw change, which we, the people, have requested that you, the elected representatives, appointed to the governing body, not elected, are to discuss and to consider. Another speaker will discuss that request. Getting back to the reasons for the bylaw change we are now discussing. This change seeks to create balance between localities having a large population and therefore significant weighted voting power, with other member localities having smaller populations and therefore less weighted voting power. This change will create a logical progression of the vice chair to become chair in the next year. That makes sense. The vice chair learns the duties of the chair and then assumes the role of the chair the following year. A classic mentor-protege relationship. We looked at the population of the member localities of the HRTAC and we decided that 100,000 people made sense as a good number to separate large from small cities and counties. Under this approach, the chair can only serve 1 year and cannot be voted as chair again for a 6-year period of time. This idea is to rotate the chair, giving everyone an opportunity to run the HRTAC meetings, to make the appointments that the chair can now make. To set the agenda for our commission, we wish to avoid using weighted voting power, the ability for a dynasty to be created. This is a concern amongst many because under the current Aubrey Lane bylaws, the chair of the HRTC has a great deal of power. We the people have witnessed the ill effects of dynasties and bureaucracies in our country that can be created in our all-appointed governing bodies.
Stranger, would you be kind enough to just summarize it?
Okay. In summary, I'd just like to say that, like I said before, that we really want a lot more representation and be able to have some decision-making what goes on. And, you know, we the citizens are feeling the weight of taxation and everything on us. I looked at the budget and I went, really? I supported 4 children on less than what the lowest person there made. I cannot believe that that amount of money is just doled out. We are tired of paying taxes, and I just want that noted.
Thank you, Ms. Lane.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Daniela Costu. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm going to be addressing Section H concerning the quorum, and we'd like to see the following changes. The quorum is a majority of the commission, which majority shall include at least a majority of the chief elected officers of the counties and cities embraced by the commission, and those present shall represent a minimum of 2/3 of the population of the 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23. The secretary shall read the total population represented by those members prior to the chair declaring that a quorum exists. at least one representative from the House of Delegates of Virginia and one member of the Virginia Senate shall be present for a quorum to exist. In addition to the requirement for one representative from the House of Delegates and one member of the Senate being present at the meeting, only the number of chief elected officers of the counties and cities embraced by the commission shall be counted for the purposes of determining if sufficient representation exists for a quorum. In summary, what we're requesting this change to ensure that the law is being met and to require that at least one representative from the Virginia House of Delegates and one member of the Virginia Senate is present. This is a duty for the Secretary, a newly elected officer, to be added to the HRTAC, and the results of the Secretary's quorum findings shall be recorded in the minutes. This change will ensure that we have completed the proper due diligence required to publicly reaffirm that a quorum is present and that an elected representative of we the people has performed this important function. Having at least one member of the House of Delegates and the Senate is needed so that the HRTAC will have the benefit of their insight and their wisdom. Isn't that why the General Assembly made them members of our commission in the first place? Unfortunately, as written, a quorum can be established without any representation from the House of Delegates and the Senate. This will also require a change in the bylaws to add a secretary as an officer. We'd like to request a bylaws change number 5 to add a requirement for an elected secretary to be an officer of the HRTAC. This would become a requirement F in Article 3, Officers and Duties section. We request that the HRTAC Bylaws Committee meet and decide the other duties of the Secretary. We request that HRTAC Bylaws Committee create a prose needed to update the HRTAC bylaws accordingly. We do request that when they are doing this, they limit the office of Secretary to only elected members of the HRTAC. We feel that our elected representatives should be responsible to we the people. Having our HRTAC officers as only elected members of the commission is the only way that we can ensure that our accountability by commission is actually accountable to us, we the people, the voters of Tidewater, or as it's often called, Hampton Roads. I thank you for this time.
Thank you, appreciate it. Mr. Reed, please. Good afternoon, sir.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. One of my speakers was unable to come today because you hold these meetings during the daytime and we can't get away from work. It's very inconvenient for us to participate. We've asked you to change that, you've decided not to. Because of that, I'm going to have to change the way I make my remarks. My speaker was going to read the bylaw changes we've proposed to make sure that all of you at least hear them. We attended the Bylaws Committee in this meeting. They weren't discussed. The Bylaws Committee chatted about a few things, talked about some things that you guys decided, and then disbanded in 20 minutes. They didn't go through the pages of the changes we submitted to you before this organization was created. A lot of work and effort went into that for you guys to consider what we have to say to do a better job. So I'm going to change up. I was going to read the specific changes you've already received over and over and over, and you have yet to read and deliberate and vote upon, or even discuss. So I'll get to the point of those changes in my section. The changes that I have affect in the bylaws, Article 4 meetings. They affect Section J for the decisions of the committee. They affect voting. They affect Section M for the agenda. And what they basically say, to make sure I have time in my limited 5 minutes, is that what we want you to do is, first of all, do away with this ridiculous process of a voice vote. That violates the intent of the law. A couple of you go, I motion this. A couple of people go, I, like happened when Frank Wagner was elected as the chairman of the Finance Committee. And half the people went, what just happened? But nobody counted the yay votes to determine that it actually met the criteria of a 2/3. That never happened. And as a matter of fact, none of those votes were recorded in the minutes, so we have no idea who of you voted yes and who voted no. How is that accountable? So get rid of voice voting. It doesn't make sense with weighted voting. In addition to that, you guys are going to be deciding a whole lot of things. If we've learned nothing about the Elizabeth River Crossing project in Portsmouth, we've learned that a public-private partnership handing over our public infrastructure to raise tolls whenever, whatever, that should come before us to decide. And that, for you to hear us, should go on the ballot as a referendum. These massive projects you're talking about, $6 billion bridge tunnels for the port, that too should go on a ballot so every one of you know what we want you to do for us. Make better use of the ballot to decide these massive, huge decisions. And these are in your bylaw changes. In addition to those bylaw changes, there's a very eloquent solution that I think you should consider. We can do regional decision-making better. And the way to do that, friends, is to make use of your existing local governments. These decisions you're going to make aren't needed overnight. If you want to pick the third crossing instead of the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, great. Make a motion to do that. Then every one of you go back to your Board of Supervisors or local city council, put it on the agenda of the next meeting, and allow every member of that local government who was elected by their people to vote on it. And then, whoever is sitting at this body, you carry forward the wisdom of your city council and you cast a directed vote. You don't just decide on your own that if your city council votes one way and you don't like it, you're going to cast a vote here for all the citizens. You're going to hear about another bylaw change later in the speakers. And we have an interesting situation on the bylaws of all things. One of my council members added to the legislative agenda in Virginia Beach this bylaw change to let us speak here on agenda items, to go to Richmond and make it a law. It was voted on by my city council. It passed 10-1. The one no vote, the guy from my city sitting on this body. How can he represent all 435,000 of us if he decides he doesn't like that change when the entire city council voted yes, except him?
Mr. Greenman, I appreciate the fact that you're very passionate, but again, we don't want to get into a personal...
It's not personal.
It's very personal.
Public vote.
It's very
Not
personal.
personal. Come on, Alan.
So let me just say this.
Royce.
The point remains the same. If you who are appointed to represent our city government here on this body, then why don't you go back to your local government and ask their opinion on whether we want a third crossing or a Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel? What's the harm in that? That's what I'm asking you to put in the bylaws. It's a better way to do regional deliberation. Hey, it gives you political cover. If you didn't want to do it, you can say, well, I wasn't really in favor of it, but my city council was. So at the end of the day, please read these changes we gave you before you first met and before you first adopted the bylaws from Aubrey Lane. We're serious. We're here to help you. And you haven't even taken the time to read them, consider them, speak about them. And when you do vote on them, don't put them in a block. Vote on them one at a time and talk about them, because there's some really good ideas in here. And I wish that you would at least give us the due consideration that we give you for taking our time to be here. I have to work late tonight to make up the time I'm here. Thank you.
Ms. Waverly Woods.
Hello, thank you.
See you, young lady.
Thank you. Good to see you again. I'm here regarding the Hrtac bylaw changes for Article 4 meeting, Section P. Order in conduct of business. Change Section 1 to require that any resident living within 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23 shall have the right to speak on any agenda item, resolution, or motion for up to 5 minutes. The chair shall poll the public and shall permit speakers on each agenda item, resolution, or motion. Recognition. The chair shall poll the public present prior to taking final action upon each agenda item, resolution, or motion before the commission. The chair shall recognize each public speaker for who is granted up to 5 minutes to address the commission. Public speakers shall be a resident living within 14 cities and counties within Planning District 23. Summary. We the people demand these changes. We have put these before you many times, as Rita's just said, and they have not been addressed. We are offended, and we do not feel that we have the same right to address our governing body here that we have in our own city councils or board of supervisors. The bylaw changes with the other bylaw changes that include the right for we the people to submit agenda items to our commission, the right to speak on any resolution of our commission, remove items from the consent agenda and then speak on those items during the meeting. These are reasonable requests, and they need to be added to the bylaws as soon as possible. We submitted these changes before the first meeting to our Hrtac, and you have not yet discussed them as a body and brought them up for a vote. Again, this is unacceptable. By the law, you need to be made aware that this change was included in a city Virginia Beach legislative agenda to 2015. It was adopted by duly elected City Councilman John Moss. The motion to adopt this request for the General Assembly is change the laws to demand that this body give we the people the proper consideration and respect passed by a vote of 10-1 previously mentioned. The elected City Council of the City of Virginia Beach passed this bylaw 10-1 with only a sole no vote. That was done by Mayor Will Sessoms. The man appointed to this body to represent the 435,000 citizens in Virginia Beach. How can Mr. Will Sessoms claim to represent 435,000 citizens of Virginia Beach if he decides a no vote to the bylaw change?
Please.
That's not personal, it's the facts.
Ms. Woods.
I am suggesting, who is he representing if it's not the we, the people of the City of Virginia Beach?
At this point, I certainly am not going to stand in for the mayor of Virginia Beach, but he currently is the mayor representing the population that overwhelmingly.
Exactly my point.
So with that being said, if you can be more germane to.
I thought this was extremely germane to this.
I understand, but again, we don't want to have personal attacks.
It is not a personal attack. I am not speaking about him as an individual. I am not speaking about him as a husband, a father, or I'm not even speaking about his backyard. I am speaking about him as my representative for the City of Virginia Beach. That is quite germane to this, and that is not personal. His votes matter to everyone, and especially to those that live in the City of Virginia Beach. He is clearly not representing we the people.
Thank you for your.
Amen.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, I'd like to have this submitted to the record.
Thank you. Mr. Tom Thornton, please.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Tom Thornton. I'm from Portsmouth. This is concerning Article 6, finances. We're asking that for Article 6, the Executive Director, the selection of the Executive Director and related compensation package shall require each of the local governing bodies within the 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23 to vote on the proposed Executive Director and related compensation. 2/3 of the 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23 shall have voted in support of the proposed Executive Director and corresponding compensation prior to the Commission voting to employ or contract an Executive Director. Once selected, every 4 years, each of the local governing bodies within the 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23 shall vote to reaffirm continuing with the employment or contract with the current Executive Director. If 2/3 of the local governing bodies from the 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23 do not accept continuing employment or a contractual relationship with current Executive Director, the Commission shall recommend a different Executive Director for approval by 2/3 of the 14 counties and cities within Planning District 23. In summary, we the people are paying a lot of money for this executive director. This concept offers our local elect governing bodies the option to get rid of an underperforming executive director. Members of our commission, the bylaw changes works in tandem with the other changes we have presented today. They are a well-crafted set of recommendations. Frankly, they are a better way to make our commission accountable. If the commission is not accountable, then why was it named the Accountability Commission? I thank you for your time.
Mr. Marcus Oldacre-Stropski, please. Nice to see you, sir.
Nice to see you too, sir.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, honorable commissioners, fellow citizens. Full disclosure, I am not a member of any organization that was represented previously at this podium. I will say that I have breakfasted and conversed with some of the people who spoke here. And so I'm not speaking as a representative of that group. As a citizen who is concerned with the political goings-on in my hometown of Portsmouth and its outskirts, including much of the world, I want to say that most of their proposals are sensible and desirable. But I didn't come here to speak on that topic. Tuesday evening at the MacArthur Memorial, Connect Hampton Roads held what it billed as a public transportation summit, delineating how public transit supports economic growth. They brought an impressive panel of speakers there, including the mayor of Meridian, Mississippi, a spokesperson for the city of Charlotte and the surrounding areas, and a spokesperson for the American Conservative Center, their transportation policy division. What was the central theme of each presentation was how public transit is essential to economic vitality. It's interesting to note that the representative of Charlotte, an area, part of the Southeast with which we frequently compare ourselves, used similar language to what I used before you in a previous appearance. And the essence of it is, we cannot pave our way out of congestion. She emphasized that their philosophy relies on a balance and a diverse approach to moving people and products. Coupled with the presentation that the Secretary of the Department of Rail and Public Transportation gave at the TPO meeting, the condition we find ourselves in with funding from the Commonwealth falling off dramatically in 2019. Now, this is something that Hrtac and the HRTPO should be looking at closely. And so the recommendation that the enabling legislation for Hrtac be modified to allow the use of regional funds for the support of public transportation is even more crucial. I want to urge you to look at that carefully. Members of the General Assembly who serve on this commission, I want you to take that back to Richmond and move your colleagues to an understanding of the fact that public transportation is not just some liberal conspiracy to waste taxpayer funds. Real people are moving on real modes of public transportation, and business growth depends on having a multimodal approach. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir, for your time. That concludes our speakers. Appreciate each and every one of you coming today to speak. Yes, Mr. Joanna.
Is there any way that we get a copy of all of the amendments that they suggest?
It has been given to staff already, and I'm assuming staff will then distribute it to other
Is
administrators.
that can be mailed to us?
It's an email. Would you like it to
I
break
don't
down?
have them.
We would have made it.
I have a
We would.
fax, and I'll give you my fax number. 397-6624.
Anything else, Mr. Joanna?
No, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Wallace?
We have a bylaws committee.
Yes, sir.
We contemplate that body deliberating the suggestions that have been forwarded to us and having some kind of feedback or what happens after.
If I can refer to Mr. Frame, please.
Well, we've had a meeting, we don't have a final set of recommendations for you yet. We listened to the public last time and we received written materials as well. The committee had its discussions about what we thought we would recommend to the entire commission. Those have been reduced to a red line copy with the help of our attorney, but the committee itself is going to meet later to talk about the recommendations that should come forward. It's still a work in progress, Mr. Mayor, and hopefully by the next meeting we'll have widely disseminated our recommendations so we can talk about them at the next meeting if that's okay with the chair.
The point being that the committee will have also the opportunity to receive this information that's been presented today, to digest it and use it as part of their deliberation.
The comments that we've heard today?
Yes, sir.
Yes. And as you will recall, before we had our first meeting of the bylaws committee, I communicated with every member of the commission that we were meeting, and did they have any suggestions that would improve the bylaws. We heard from you, Mr. Mayor, for sure. And then, if I think verbally,
Thank you. Thank you. Next item on our agenda is minutes of October 16, 2014, Hrtac regular meeting. Is there a motion at this time to approve, please? So moved. Thank you, Mr. Sessoms. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Frame. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Next will be the Finance Committee report. I'm going to defer this at this time to Mr. Gene Hunt. Sir, would you please?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee. Tonight, the Finance Committee, or today, the Finance Committee would like to report and recommendations from the Finance Committee. Today is an important first step to allow this body to utilize its available funds. We recognize that and adopting that operating budget. You can go to the next slide. Okay, so we did the draft 2015 operating budget that was presented to you September 29, 2014. We did make in that meeting, as an entire body, we made decisions concerning the Hrtac organization. This budget does reflect those decisions that we made. The public hearing was held on the draft 2015 operating budget. That was held on November 5th in this room. We received 9 public comments, a series of oral and written comments, all included in your package today under section 5A. I'm going to summarize what we heard from the projects, and what we heard was a solid support for
majority of negative comments were concerning the administrative costs and directly related to the personnel costs. Based on those comments and based on some other considerations that the Finance Committee put together, there will be two differences in what I give you today as a recommendation versus what's in your written package. First is, this is a summary of the operating budget. And as you can see, the number of an HR tax staff is a lower number than what was provided in your package. And I will get to that in just a moment, but also we took out the deputy executive director, search consultant. And what we decided was that HR CPO staff support was absolutely vital, the $72,000 number, and we could not be where we are today without their support, the services that VDOT has provided to us thus far. So we protected both of those.
You want us to hold questions?
Yes, if
Yes,
you're
please.
so kind, I thank you for that, sir, and consideration.
So the difference in the budget number for personnel is on fiscal year 2015 operating budget.
Where's the money coming from, though?
And what we have decided as a finance committee, and are going to propose this morning, is the deletion of 2 members of that staff, leaving an executive director, a CFO, and an administrative assistant. And the reason for that is that we're 50% of the way through, if not more, 2015, the 2015 operating budget. Until we get the executive director on board and they define what type of services they need, we feel like it is a little premature to put out his organization for him. However, we feel like with the laws that we will have in place, the 2 signatures required on all expenditures, that an executive director and CFO are absolutely vital in setting up the right organization. The operating budget for HRCPO staff is left intact as proposed. I'm not going to detail it out. I mean, we've all discussed it before, and I think it's every line item makes some sense for operating this commission. The next big change is on the HR tax project, and the change is at the top. HR tax, as far as the Finance Committee, we've expressed support for the following projects, but we are not prepared to commit any funding except for the $44 million previously allocated to I-64 Peninsula Line at this time. This was done after the PDOT capital planning pool was presented to a joint group of the Finance Committee and the Technical Committee. And at that time, it became obvious to us that we're not sure how we're going to proceed as a group, so why commit funds to those projects that could somehow be misinterpreted to being spent. That will allow this commission to separately act on each and every item, or if we come up with an overview plan, that we will act on that. What I will say is that based on that last presentation, the Finance Committee is highly recommending that we bring back together the Technical and Finance Committee to put together the modeling scenarios that he has promised to run for us to determine what is the way forward. Basically, the remaining slides here basically show the projects. These are the projects that have been repeatedly run up here. This is I-64 Peninsula Lighting, phases 1, 2, and 3. The third crossing remains in the plan as directed by HRCPO and adopted by this commission. The south side widening and the high-rise bridge, including the I-64, 264 interchange, and the US 460, 58 to 13 connector. So on behalf of the Finance Committee, I'm going to move for approval of the 2015 operating budget as amended.
Chairman, I have a question.
Item 2 was looking because we were in the process of going and getting bids, I guess, and responses. We might be able to get better leverage on the cost per lane mile if we had both segments or all three segments potentially in play. I could have misread that, but I just want to get clarification on at least segment 2.
Mr. Kilpatrick?
Yes, sir. Delegate Jones. The segment 1 is currently in procurement, and with the expectation there's $44 million in Hrtac money along with $100 million in I'll call it state resources. Segment 2, we are moving towards forward with the I'll call it the preliminary engineering effort there, with the idea of it following, and I don't have the exact year, but in terms of going out to procurement, I think that was the next in line. So if the decision of the Hrtac is not to move forward with section 2, then we would suspend the work until we were authorized to expend money on that. But again, our goal was to move from section 1 to section 2 and immediately to section 3, then jump back and work on the Port Eustis interchange. I'll call it phase 4.
So I guess if I can, Mr. Chairman, I have a follow-up question. So this action, really, what does that do to what you were doing with segment 2 and 3? Does it have any material impact? I don't know. I want to make sure that we don't end up, slowing down the progress. I wasn't familiar with the debate discussion. And first I've seen, the recommendation. I saw one came across my desk, but just wanted to get it.
If there's if there's any significant delay in making decisions on segment 2 and 3, it will begin to impact our work.
Okay, and one further, what would significant, I just need a little more clarification from you. Timeline is all I'm asking. To come back in April of next year or next month, unless we've taken no action, then when does it impede progress? We know we have to go 6 lanes other side of 199. I would hope we've all acknowledged that needs to be done. So I don't want us to, not be the most judicious use of our taxpayer dollars when we're looking at spending this type of money to improve a very congested part of our region.
Mr. Hrtac had reminded me, we're looking to go to procurement, start the procurement process in the spring of 15 on segment 2. So that to kind of give you a chart in terms of a time frame.
And that's like 6 months.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so if we take no action, Chairman, if I may, so if we take no action now, we take no action in December, and we're not going to meet until April, how would get to the potential impact what we're trying to do?
That will impact the schedule, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Currently have a motion by Mr. Hunt. Is there a second? Unless you have a technical question, we need a second. Do we have a second, please?
Second.
Second from Mr. Price. Mr. Joanna?
Just got a couple of questions on this motion. First of all, Delegate Jones said something about Route 199. Is I-64 and 199 the same?
No, section is technically the same. What you're talking about is the section that you're talking about is I-64 through the northernmost or westernmost, depending on how you align 64 to the north, to the westernmost access to Williamsburg on 199. That's section 3.
So, if I understand, then there's another road here in addition to 64 that you're going to add to it and put it into the project. Is that correct?
No, what we're saying is that besides the $44 million for phase 1, that the other 2 phases need to go into the modeling scenario with the rest. I think the new information...
My question is not on that point. My question is, if we're going to go up to segment 3, are we going to include additional money for Route 199, which I'm looking at a map, if this is the right, please tell me, that goes around Williamsburg. Are we going to fix that also?
No.
Just 64? Another question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
With regard to the staff of HRTPO, why can't the highway department do
To the staff of HRTPO.
this? Instead of HRTPO, why can't the staff be that?
If I can have, Mr. Mr. Vice Chairman, if I can ask Cornelia Rademacher, one of the things that we've always tried to do is be separate in terms of, as a result of the legislation. But it's my understanding the HRTPO staff is very concerned at the amount of work that is being done to help all three organizations. And apparently, one, you're asking, this would help to alleviate your concerns, one. Two, your question seems, why can't VDOT do that? Is that my understanding?
That's correct. I thought we were independent agencies.
Yes, we are. In terms of VDOT doing it, Mr. Hunt, have you prepared to answer that, or does Mr. Kilpatrick want to say something?
I think VDOT needs to speak for themselves, but I can tell you from the Finance Committee's viewpoint that basically we want to make sure that the dollars that are spent, that are used from Hrtac money, are truly invested in the road infrastructure and not within the course of normal business of VDOT.
Is that true?
Debbie Joanna, today, some of the folks here that are providing some of the technical support, the AV support, minutes, some of those things are VDOT employees, and that's part of our administrative costs are within the Hampton Roads District. The question is whether these services that the TPO has been providing, again, these are support services that I believe that augment the HR tab. In terms of the work that we can do, can VDOT in fact support some operations? The answer is yes, and we're doing that today. But the more extensive level, again, it would simply be whether that we would look for, we potentially need reimbursement depending on the scale of the work.
Further question on the point.
Please.
These amounts are really not that much money. I don't have a problem with the. Why are we paying the executive director of HRTPO $1890?
Good question.
That's not a question for me.
If I may defer that question that you posed, Mr. Hunt, did you get the question from Mr. Joanna?
Yeah, what you want to know is basically for shared services, HRTPO is funded, as you know, by the localities. And basically what we have done as a group is we have bartered and we have stood this commission up now for 3 months on the backs of what the localities pay in the TPO and what VDOT has been comfortable in loaning to us for giving us those services. Now we are at the point where we need to carry ourselves. So until the executive director gets hired, which right now appears to be spring of next year, then what we've been using is the HRTPO executive director. And therefore, this commission is basically saying we're going to pay for her service.
Mr. Chairman, maybe I was mistaken when we voted earlier. We said we're going to be a separate organization from HTPO. Now, if we're not, and we're merging, for whatever reason we're doing it, I want to know why we're paying them $19,000.
If I could, this has nothing to do with the merger. This is basically a bridge. This is a bridge account. We're basically saying that from the HRTPO, we continue to use these services, and that at some point in time, Hrtac use their money to do these services. When we get an executive director on board, and we have our own staff, this whole section will go away.
If I could ask Delegate Jones, did you want to say something at this time?
Yeah, I mean, he's done a very good job. This is just a bridge to get us to where we can get established.
and we will need to amend the legislation so that dollars can come from within because it's transportation related, and they're just showing the cost to stand up. I know the question was earlier about why don't we use the state treasury to house the money. Well, we can't because then we can't bond, as I understand it. If we don't hold it, we cannot bind it, so that's pretty simple. So we have to have a local repository to be able to do that. I think that's correct. I've asked that question repeatedly and been told, we can't bond unless we actually have the money in our possession.
So again, to make sure that the point is well understood, the Budget Committee does understand that this is a bridge, and that in the next budget session, which will be presented by our executive director instead of by us saying what do we think we need, then this whole section should disappear and should be supplanted by these positions that are on the next page.
If I can,
Or
Mr.
the
Joanne,
previous page.
if you have another question, I do see Mr. Price wanting to say something on behalf of what Charlie Joanne was talking about.
No, I have another question.
All right, are you completed?
Yeah, I guess.
All right, thank you, Mr. Price.
Just a clarification on Delegate Jones' remark. Did I understand him to say that based upon this recommendation, an amended version, that there would be a delay in phase 2?
My concern is simple what you just said, because what I'm hearing is if we don't meet or discuss this before April, we're going to tie up that section 2, which can immediately go. Now, unless you want to either amend or estimate the motion to amend his motion, you certainly can continue, because you're the second.
I seconded to put it on the discussion so that we can discuss it. My question now is to Mr. Kirkpatrick, what could we do to alleviate that delay in this motion that I could immediately recommend?
In reference to segment 2, again, what we're looking to do is begin the procurement process in the next spring. If the decision is not made to move forward with that project, by Hrtac, we would not move forward with the procurement process. We're doing some, I'll call it very small amounts of preliminary engineering within our organizational budget to make sure we know the scale and scope of what we're doing. But to really get into any meaningful procurement process, we want to ensure that the money is there. The contracting community is not interested in bidding on a project that may or may not happen. So I think it's important for this group to make a decision positively or negatively on that project before we go out to procurement in the spring.
Yeah, Mr. Price, on this. I have Doug, but if you would be kind enough to
Let me make sure that everybody understands the motion on the floor. The motion on the floor is to include our support for each and every one of those projects.
Yes.
Okay? What we do not know as the Finance Committee is how much money to appropriate for each and every one of those projects. All we have is a target, and it's a loose target. Okay? And all we're saying is that between now and I think we can, if the meeting of this body is what's the elephant in front of you getting to do, I'm sure this body will meet. But simply to say, well, we can't get there because, in April we're going to go out for bids and we don't have money appropriated, this body can appropriate money in January.
Before I go to Mr. Frank Delegate Jones.
I'm not sure that the way the bylaws are looking, we're not going to be meeting in January necessarily. And I would mention for those on Virginia Beach and Chesapeake that in fact the recommendation is agreed to and passed it, then the work on 264 and 64 will stop. Not totally, but it will severely hamper that very needed and necessary project. I must have missed something from the last time we met until now, and I thought we were in general agreement that these were the projects to move forward. I understand we got shock value when we had the presentation of how far the money would go that we raised in 2313, but I do think it would be very short-sighted to back off these projects. If we want to take out segment 3, I think that certainly makes sense to back that out. But VDOT, as we all know, works on a 6-year plan. They have revenues that are available and allocated, so then the contracting committee can actually say, yeah, we know that's going to happen. I think this action today, if we say we're not really sure, and I'm certainly ready to vote
on everything. You can remove segment 3. We got the high-rise bridge, which is critically important. We have money in there for that. I don't think that's going forward in here, is it? And
Well, let me
and
do
we have
this.
money for the SEIS, so I thought it was general agreement that for the Commonwealth, in this part of the Commonwealth, which is struggling financially, and we look at Northern Virginia with the sequestration, that the positive impact of these dollars that are being collected, we would do pay-as-you-go for a handful of them, and you only buy in prospective revenues. So you can have a lot of money saved up, which is great to do, but now if they're proceeding on segment 1, they're in that process, they've got a general idea what it's going to cost. I think the wild card is more important is interchange. And really, I think segment 3 potentially, I think I had the biggest question about moving some lights away. I think I remember that
Mr.
correctly.
Jones, would you be kind enough then, unless you're not agreeable to amend your motion, would you make a substitute motion?
Yeah, I would move that we would proceed with all the, what we had previously discussed, except for segment 3 widening at this time.
Second. Would you second that, please? Thank you, Mr. Wright. Now, can we have discussion only on the substitute motion? Yes,
It was the, sorry, I guess.
Yes, please.
Mr. Wagner's on the phone.
No, Mr. Wagner is not on the phone, sir.
Okay. All right, then basically the issue that we heard is that we didn't want to tie up all of this new funding stream and this be the only funding stream. We heard, I think Secretary Lane came in last meeting and he said, okay, deals with the ports, for instance, are outside the gate of the port, not doable. And what we don't want to make sure, what we want to make sure is that these dollars get spent not on what VDOT would normally do to prepare for the project, but to actually build that project. And the Finance Committee was concerned with the fact that we don't have enough data to line them up, even as with a pay-as-you-go, that decisions that we make today may severely impact those of tomorrow, i.e. that we've tied up all our money down the stream and something has to fall out that we really didn't want to.
And I don't know if we've done that, because when I looked at what the Secretary presented in the public hearing, you look at the cash flow of 2017, 18, 19, you can always go and you can bond once you get executive director on board, once you get all established, you can decide then early to go to the bond market and alleviate the concerns that we might have. If we collected about $170 million, $180 million, we'll be at $200 million by the end of this year. So I don't think that we're saying we're going to pay everything in cash, but if we're going to slow down in the area that we've got some real choke points in our region, because we haven't decided how we're going to either go either through bonds or pay as you go, I just think we need to take action to make a statement that this is what we need to be doing as a region to address the transportation needs that have been readily identified by the TPO in the region over the last decade at least, from my perspective.
Well,
Let me do this, if I may.
think
I have a
we're fine.
second by Mr. Wright. Did you want to say anything on the motion, sir? No, I go to Mr. Frank. Mr. Frank? Thank you. Continue, please. Did you want to say anything else, Mr. Hunt?
No, I can support the motion.
Do you want to withdraw
That's
your
not
motion
the-
to make
Can I
that
say
point?
Mr. Chair.
I apologize, Mr. Sessom.
That's fine. First of all, Gene, I want to thank you for reaching out to me this morning about this. And, it appears there's some communication at the state level that we got confused, but I'm glad the delegate judge is here to get us on the right track. And that being the case, I would hope that you would represent the Finance Committee, we could pull yours and go along with Delegate Jones
I think
and get these projects on
I can see
board.
my way clear to amend my motion to
And we keep the operating budget the same as you presented.
Correct.
All right, with that being said, if you would be kind enough, unless...
I'll withdraw my motion.
All right, would you
Make the motion.
please, and you're going to withdraw your primary motion, you defer the second?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Yes, Mr.
Before you amend the motion, could I just ask?
Yes, sir, please.
Informational question. The computer went out, so somebody don't want me to. But, and I can't blame them.
You don't have, wait, you don't have a mic?
No, this one ain't working either.
Too many of them are turned on.
Well, my concern is, I don't know if you can be recorded if you don't have a mic.
I think it's designed that we have too many on at one time.
if it is any feedback.
Yeah, this is working.
All right, thank you, sir.
I just wanted to ask a question because, just to be clear, I'm not sure what we're voting on when you say a list of projects. What exactly list are you talking about? Are you talking about the first, second, third segment only?
If I would allow Delegate Jones, since you're the one who was,
I would say to my colleagues,
would you put your mic back on, sir?
yeah,
Thank you.
again, to my colleague, if you look at the projects, the motion, I think is going to be on your page 6. We include dollars for the I-64, I-264 interchange, is what we discussed at the last meeting. They had the motion for segment 1, which is the next item. It would include widening segment 2, which is the third item. It would exclude widening segment 3. We wouldn't include the Fort Eustis Boulevard interchange right now, not necessarily included in my opinion. And then you would have the dollars for the SEIS, as I understand it, for the third crossing, which is about $5 million, I think. And then we have the money for the preliminary design engineering for the high-rise, which is $10 million. And then we had, Johnny, I think it was up to $350 million for the 264-64 interchange with 2 interchanges on the old 44, 264, I believe that's correct. So that's what that motion says. You would exclude, Johnny, the 4th and 5th items, which are segment 3 and the Fort Eustis Boulevard interchange for now. So I'll proceed with the others. And then that would not interfere with what VDOT is doing on our behalf, getting better numbers. And I agree with Gene. I think we do not want, we want to make sure we got solid numbers. We want to hold up the progress that has been made at this point. Does that help?
It helps tremendously. On safety, if you could, Mr. Chairman. I'm sorry. Mr. Chairman of Finance. Appropriations.
You're very good at this, so go on.
All right. On the third crossing.
Pardon me, Mr. Chairman, I think it might be helpful if we put this up on the screen so everybody can see exactly what we're referring to.
Quite well taken, thank you. Ms. Wadman, Dr. Wadman.
Mike, did this project?
Let me do this. We currently have 2 motions being withdrawn. We obviously need a primary motion, either Mr. Hunt or Mr. Jones.
I'm going to modify the primary motion to basically adopt the budget for staff, for our operating budget, and include those Hrtac projects, all except for Fort Eustis Boulevard and the I-64 Southside widening. Second, yeah. Second.
Is there a second to that, Mr. Price? Thank you. Is that understood? Yes. Mr. Hallman, is that understood? I see your hand.
Yeah, that's understood. My question is, why is segment 3, Fort Eustis Boulevard, why is not the whole list being included? What is the rationale for not having everything on this list included? Because it seems to me the TPO and we have said these are all projects we intend to do. So why aren't we saying they all stay on the list?
And I appreciate it's a timing element. If I can have the Delegate Jones.
Mr. Mayor, I'm fine with all of them being included, but his concern from the Finance Committee's perspective was we didn't have hard costs for everything, and did not want to then commit to all the above and it being much higher, and you can't proceed with other projects. So since they weren't immediate and the need for VDOT, having talked to them offline, it made sense to remove those 2. I'm totally convinced that I think they should be included, and in deference to what the good work of the Finance Committee, I think that this will get us where we need to be and injure any of the projects we're looking to make. That's what I was all trying to do with the note, Mr. Mayor.
We don't want to appropriate money that can be spent. Once we appropriate it, it can be spent, and then we've spent it, or it's being pulled, and we can report it, and we've wasted funds.
Ms. Jones?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just trying to get clarification, because if I recall, we were discussing, and these are very important. The 64 expansion is extremely important and is a top priority regionally. What I'm confused about is when I believe this body agreed to the 44 million, it was specifically to basically put the final necessary funding on that phase and to move forward. And also with Hrtac, there are other considerations. But also it depends on, as we all know, what funding resources we have, because it's not all just coming from Hrtac. But I agree with Mayor Hallman, this is a priority, and I understand your rationale. It just seems as though, particularly removing the segmenting it, separating out 64, to me is a concern.
We just do them all, huh?
We just re-added 64 to the motions.
And the for Eustis, the whole, putting everything, I'm sorry, you guys keep making motions and sometimes I hear half of the motion.
No, I put my microphone down because I can't stand it.
Well, let me make
No,
sure.
I apologize, because I'm following.
The motion is to include all except for 2. And what I will tell this, and I will remind everybody that once we vote on this, you have authorized to spend. Okay? And you have authorized to spend, and you don't know how much it really costs.
But that, I believe.
Now, once you start to engage, and then you find out that you cannot afford one of them, you've spent money on one that you didn't really put on top.
And I certainly appreciate that, but I think that that's true deliberating over any proposed road project. But I think you just said the motion was to remove the 2, but I thought you said the motion was to include everything. So now
To include all except for Eustis, which we're not in the way of their process. And
oh, I absolutely, I agree with that. The last thing we want to be doing is to be in the way of progress of moving forward the road projects. I'm kind of perplexed at that, and how ours.
Let me go to Mr. Sessoms, please.
And I'll be real. When you get a chance, I'd like to speak to, please.
I apologize.
I'll be
Mr.
real
Sessoms,
quick,
and I'll
but
certainly get through supplies.
I just need some quick clarification. This is using a lot of cash up front right now, from what I recall, and not using very much bonding authority. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That being said, and Gene, this is where I need your help. That being said, it would be hard to believe that we couldn't get everything on the list done with the ability to bond. We have a great deal of that ability. I don't know if that would give us a comfort to include the entire list, knowing that debt perhaps, well, we know there's some debt going to be required anyway, but additional debt might have to be obtained to complete what has been our priorities for a good while. I have no objection to follow that path, but again, I want you, represent the Finance Committee at the top level, to be okay with that, if that can get us on to making a decision here.
The purpose of the Finance Committee is not to basically slow down road construction, but it is to protect our finances. And I think, like I said, once we authorize this whole group has said, go forth and spend. And if you're going to spend on something that ultimately, when we go to bond, which we're not even close to having that authority yet, okay? And the next thing that we'll talk about is the ability to even get money in the locality or into the region and put it in our own bank and go and represent ourselves at a bond here. When you're basically saying we want to spend all this out of cash.
Let me do this. I'm going to go. I have Mr. Wallace, and also Mr. Kilpatrick wants to say something germane to this. Yes, sir.
Yeah, just some, I guess, some technical points in terms of when we came to this body with the modeling about options and how we can move forward with available resources as they came in, I'll call it on a cash 8 years. And I think I hear what's going on here in terms of what we will do at VDOT. We can only spend money as it comes to us. And as you know, this HR tax, the funds coming to HR tax, we can't spend money in advance of the money coming to us. So this money will flow to these projects over the next, again, I think that I use the term about 8 years. By the time we completed, I believe the Fort Eustis was about 8 years out, somewhere in that order. So in terms of these projects, the order that we had presented for consideration was segment 1, which of course is under procurement today. The 264 interchange next spring, along with segment 2, we would begin procurement of segment 2. The third crossing and high-rise bridge, those are, the high-rise bridge is an ongoing project. We would continue that forward. The third crossing, we would immediately reinitiate the environmental document on the third crossing. And then segment 3 and Fort Eustis, if I don't have it, I got it in front of me now. And the funding for those, for segment 3 actually begins in 18, was the first year segment 3 was going to receive funds. And the Fort Eustis interchange is going to receive funds in 19. And so we would not begin work on those projects until, I'll use segment 3 until 18, January of 18, and then the interchange in January of 19. And that's how we would proceed forward with the project. So if and again, the model that was presented was a cash to carry, pay as you go type of model. If at some point this group looks to use bonding as a mechanism for either new projects or accelerating these projects, really what it could do, one of the things it could do is accelerate the completion of these projects and potentially others. So in terms of the package you have today, it gives us a game plan, I'll call it, over moving forward. I don't think that game plan is not set in stone, and I appreciate your point. Projects that once this board says VDOT go, we would go in the order that we had come to you on. But we won't be spending money on these other projects until that money comes to us. There is opportunity for this board to come back and say, we have a director, we have had time, we looked at bonding, we want to change an order, we want to accelerate. All that flexibility from our end, we're able to make that shift. So again, in terms of the approval of the budget, I understand some of the intricacies of that, but it's not going to. We are not going to. If you approve this today, we're not going to immediately begin design work on the Fort Eustis interchange unless you tell us stop what you're doing on something else and change the batting order. But right now, the batting order that we're operating under is segment 1. The 264, 64, and segment 2 start about the same time. The two engineering studies keep moving, and then 3, and then 4 would be the last project. I say 4. I'm sorry. I mean Fort Eustis interchange. Yes.
Well, let me go to Mr. Wallace. Let me go to Mr. Wallace and have then Mr. Price, and we'll certainly get around the horn here.
Okay, I have several questions and observations. The first question was, we were contemplating in funding or the restriction of funding. The assumption was to ask the question, is the assumption on the Finance Committee's report that we're going to be using a pay-as-you-go process as opposed to a bonding or a mixture of the two?
I think what the Finance Committee has come to the conclusion of is that it will take a ability to bond to move projects along at a faster pace. And that's why we're more reluctant to tie up programs with cash.
If I can go before I go to the other question. I apologize. Go ahead, sir.
I'm trying to get a clarification and understanding. Are you saying these projects that appear before us are going to be funded by cash that come into our coffers from the resources that we have available and no bond?
Yes, the first, especially the I-64s, the small change projects here, will be done by cash before we get a bonding capability stood up.
Okay, the other question is, we have this document from Secretary Lane that outlines basically some of the stuff that you're saying here, and it stipulates the time frame that Mr. Kilpatrick is referencing in the particular process. I was not aware that the projects in yellow were considered one of the funding mechanisms or programs that we were anticipating first initially. And I guess my question...
They're not.
I'm confused. So the projects that highlighted in yellow are not...
Not
part of
projects,
the deliberations we had.
no, they are, but they're projects that are, and by the nature of the millions of dollars being spent there, it is only the study, the environmentals, and the preparations for understanding what those costs are. In other words, let's not stop moving forward to do the environmental studies, do the engineering, so that we can develop a cost. And so it's preliminary monies to do that.
Okay, so then we do have the appropriations already in place or contemplating in place for another fund.
Let me do this. Mr. Jones, I know wants to talk. Right now, we're voting on, actually, these projects.
That's referring to his question about the High Rock Bridge. Several years ago, we put $5 million in to get that project back. So what the $10 million would allow would be the, the $5 million, I think, I don't know it's 10, but whatever it is, would we, to be able to continue that process so we would have a break, Mr. Mayor. And I think that's why that is here, because we advanced that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I think, Alan, I believe. And so that's why that is there. And then the other, I thought, was a discussion we had about the third crossing and updating the supplemental environmental impact statement.
And these all included in your recommendation?
Yes.
Now. But they weren't in the original motion.
That's correct.
I have other speakers. Anything else, Mr. Wells?
There's a matter this jump.
Thank you, Mr. Price, and then I have Mr. Wright and Ms. Johnson.
Just from what I heard from Mr. Patrick, then these could be included in the list without any financial implications. So if that is the case, I'd like to put them back. So that I think it would be less confusion if we go forward with complete package. Because the other problem I have is when you say drop them from the list, define that. And there would be some, I think, some confusion when
They're not being dropped from the list.
There's
There's no money being appropriated to them.
Right.
Not being dropped from the list.
I'm just, right, that's why I just want to make sure we were clear on.
I appreciate that clarification. Mr. Wright, please. Mr. Hogan,
I'll follow up with McKinney's, Price's comments. One, it seems to me that both the TPO and this organization have said these are the projects we want to do. And, I'm not quite sure why the motion didn't say this is, how we're going to fund them and the order in which we're going to do them. Because what I've just heard is that we have the funding, and the timing available to do it. What you're concerned about is committing money we don't have, right?
Do we want to prioritize? If you want to prioritize them, what I'm clearly saying as the Finance Committee was demonstrated by the VDOT model, that you do not have enough without making decisions on tolling and everything else to do all these projects. So why commit money to those until you come through that discussion? And I don't want to apply, we did not want to apply money to projects that we haven't even stuck into the model yet. We haven't even tried running the VDOT model. They proposed it to us, and they ran a scenario. But there has been no additional modeling done by Hrtac.
And what did that modeling do, and what were the parameters for that model?
Let me say this. We have a tech committee. I appreciate Mr. Neil Crawford for being here as the chairman, and it's important that that's their assignment. And they're going to get to see shortly that particular model, the scenarios, and actually plugging in the different details to look at things as it relates to bonding, as it relates to whether you go pay as you go. How can we move these projects efficiently, effectively, and cost effectively? That's exactly their particular assignment.
But right now, we're being asked to vote on something that we really don't have enough information to vote on.
Well, let me say this. I do know that, and I concur with Mr. Member. Yes, I apologize. Go ahead, please, Ms. Johnson.
I would just like to remind you that on September 29th, Secretary Lane, when he presented the projects, those first 5 projects and then the 2 development activities, they did go through the model. They did run this through the model, and they did give you all a copy of that. So when you keep saying that we have not run this through the model, we have run this through the model.
You haven't run the 7 projects through the model because the model came back and said 38, I think it was 38 years to get them all done. Okay?
Well, let me do this.
That was all of them.
I want to continue the discussion. I appreciate Mr. Holman. I do have Ms. Johnson, please, and also Mr. Wright, I think was, okay, thank you, Ms. Johnson.
I'm going to not use this. My question was, where are we? Are we looking at financial advisor and RFP? Because I think we seriously need a financial advisor here to really understand what we're doing. But I do think that we made a decision to move forward with certain things here. And I'm a little confused as to why. I thought I was going to be coming in to look at the staffing and this type of thing. I didn't realize we were getting this deep into it at this point in time. So that's kind of where I'm kind of getting confused here. But we did say this is where we wanted to go. We didn't say we were going to pay cash for it. I don't think anybody ever expected that. So I really think we need a financial advisor on board, and I think we need to understand what we're dealing with.
Let me go to Mr. Frame, and then certainly, but I do want you, if you recall, Senator Wagner was here, Frank Wagner, and he talked about, we'll put these in the budget, we'll discuss them also at the same time, which will allow us to go forward with what we're doing now. That was at a meeting, and then they had a public hearing on those items. Mr. Frame, please.
I agree with everything that's almost, we're unanimous around the table. I think about moving forward and what Linda said. I mean, we expected, at least I expected, the smart people about who would deal with the finance group and the technical group to figure out with the state, how to do the projects forward. And I mean, I really thought that's what we were. Somebody said, 3 or 4 people said, I think this is going to be a short meeting. So I think we're way down in the weeds as far as the board is concerned, that there are directors and advisors and the Commonwealth will advise us, but this package needs, the whole thing needs to move forward at one time. There's a certain amount of, faith that everybody's building.
Let me do this. Yes.
Just as a point of clarity, and I do appreciate the work. I appreciate the work the mayor has done on this and the finance committee. But I absolutely agree with what the issues that have been raised here with the projects. That we're going to more of a focus on the staffing and the operations and so forth. I do have a question as if for the future. Is my understanding was, when this body made a decision to allocate specific funding, I thought I understood there would be a public hearing for each allocation. Is that correct?
There was a public hearing. I'll defer to Mr. Hunt.
The public hearing included all the costs there.
Oh, no, I mean as each project, as every expenditure individually is decided upon. Hrtac has X number of dollars, then for each particular project.
Well, let me go to Delegate Jones, and let's see if we can come to a vote here.
I'm getting more confused by the moment. We discussed this, and we talked about pay as you go. If you look at what was given to you, at the end of next year, we'll have over $300 million in the bank, and even started drawing down paying for projects. It was always contemplated at the end of the day, when we got a couple years under our belt, we had an executive director, we might say, okay, we're getting a better value because we did segments 1 and 2 kind of in tandem, we did 2 and 3 in tandem, so we saved dollars. It makes more sense instead of paying cash for segment 3 and Fort Eustis to take a bond package and go to the market and then get value for what we're doing. And so I was under the impression today when we got here, we would do what you said, talk about the structure of the entity, the organization, and move forward with all these projects.
Right.
My only thing was to try to stop the train was, I knew if we didn't fund, but it that it would negatively impact my conversations with these gentlemen and ladies and the secretary. And that's not what I think anyone wants to do, is have the train slow down. I was fine with doing all of them at one time. I was just trying to be deferential to all the hard work that had been done by the finance committee. So if you'd love to make the motion, everything go forward, I'm sure the mayor would second it. We can be done. No, Johnny, turn Johnny's mic off.
As long as there isn't more discussion, I think it's important that this isn't rushed, because obviously there's a need that we have a discussion. And Delegate Jens, I appreciate your comments.
The only thing I'll say is there's nothing rushed about this, because we had 2
Oh,
meetings
I know, but I'm talking
this
about.
meeting. I don't know what else we need to do. We can have another public hearing, but we have certainly gone and done our due diligence with the public. So I don't want anyone to think that we're trying to rush and think that we're not.
Let me do this. We're about ready to vote. I have Delegate Graham and Mr. Price, and hopefully we can vote.
I'm going to amend the motion. I'm going to amend the motion just to re-add everything.
Your mind, you're right.
I don't need to talk, and that's the question before you amend.
We don't have a second.
All right, Mr. Chairman, I would ask Mayor Hunt, you mentioned tolls.
Mentioned what?
You mentioned tolls a few minutes ago. And that bothers me.
No, it bothers me too, sir.
So I just want to make sure that I'm not voting for a toll today by voting. I just want to make it clear to everybody, because that's going to be another argument.
Amen.
And amen. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to make it clear and on the record that this does not have anything to do with putting tolls on any of these facilities.
No, it doesn't.
Can I second the motion?
Or any other.
All right.
Second. He already seconded.
Second. Would you please, Mr. Welch, your mic is on. Did you want to say something?
No. He wants to say how to turn it off.
Push the button.
Thank you. You're on. All right.
So the motion is that we include the cost of the projects in the finance plan, and the only difference is the staffing plan. Okay.
Could you define the projects again, please?
The projects?
All of them.
All.
Second.
Appropriate second
Yes.
by Mr. Frame. We have a motion by Mr. Hunt.
No, Price was second.
No Price, I apologize. I just had a good second by Mr. Frame. I guess you wanted to, by acclamation, I guess that's what that was. With all that being said, all minds clear. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Motion carries. The next item of business is actually going to be, I'm going to ask Mr. Huber to actually talk about the next item. And if you can briefly. Yes. No. What we're going to do is because we're probably not going to have a quorum. Mr. Price must go. And what I'm going to do is, we're going to be talking about the bank account, so I would just like to have an update on the Attorney General's opinion, sir. If we could do that, sir.
I'm going to defer to my partner, Brett Spain, behind me, who was involved with Mr. Bloom's crafting and request for that. Opinion has not come back in yet, and Brett will elaborate.
As you all know, we helped Senator Wagner draft the Attorney General opinion request. We did 2 of them. They both went out in October. We have not gotten the opinion back yet. We've had an informal discussion with the Attorney General's office about it. And what we learned in that discussion was that while the Attorney General will issue an opinion regarding the general statutory questions we've asked, he will not issue an opinion about conflicts that relate to somebody other than Senator Wagner. That is a standing rule that you can't ask for an opinion about anyone other than yourself. And so because of that, we have advised the members of the commission. We sent out, we prepared a draft form for anyone who has banking affiliations that wants their own opinion on that. We've helped some people address those, and they are going out, some of them are going out this week, they're going out in the near future. And they should be added to it. They don't add anything materially different than what Senator Wagner had requested. It's just an individual opinion for the people who hadn't individually requested it before. So that's Other than that, we're just waiting.
Thank you, Mr. Spain. With that being said, I would strongly suggest that if you have a concern, please let them know, and there's nothing wrong with getting an Attorney General's opinion. But you must request it individually along with Senator Wagner. Next is for your information, Hampton Roads Transportation Fund Monthly Financial Report, attachments number 7. Unfinished and new business is correspondence A and B. We have that in our packets. I want to thank again Mayor Johnson for giving us the opportunity to have an Hrtac public information meeting Wednesday, December 10th, 2014. It'll be at the Virginia Modeling Analyst and Simulation Center from 4 to 6 in Suffolk. Then our next meeting is going to be at the Hampton Roads TAC regular meeting. It will be Thursday, December 18th, 2014, 10 a.m. Do I need a motion on that, sir? All right, I changed the time. Please notice at 10 a.m. Do I need a motion? May I have a motion, please, to change that time, please? Thank you, Mr. Holman. Is there a second? Thank you, Mr. Joanno. Members in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. Thank you. We'll see you then at 10 a.m. Do I have a motion to adjourn? God bless you. Everybody agree?